Achtung, the Vox of YouTube. It's me again, your pal Anony, here today with another exciting episode of Let's Explain Victoria 2. Sort of. What this video actually is somewhat of an addendum to my recently posted guide on the Steam Game Hub for Victoria 2. I'm not actually going to link it there, because I think you guys who watch my videos are really great. And as something of a reward video to those who actually took my advice and decided to watch this series, which I, as I said, strongly recommend. And I'm not just doing that because I want views. I want people to do that because this game is pretty complicated. I mean, I make a fucking guide called Let's Explain Victoria 2, and it's been like 50 episodes so far. Before I start, I'm going to give the disclaimer that I am a little bit ill, and by that I mean very ill. And well, not very ill. I'm not like dying. But I am very stuffy, and I am going to be coughing and congested, and I'll try to keep them out of the video as much as I can, but like that, there's probably going to be at least a few sniffles and coughs and the like in the video. I'll try to edit them out, but sometimes I won't be able to. So with that being said, let's talk about what you're looking at now. One of the last things, one of the last parts of my actual guide was challenges section for the very advanced players. Usually, Let's Explain Victoria 2 does not so much cater to the likes of them. There's, not because I don't like them or anything, but it's because it's supposed to be a guide for the more new players, or at least the journeymen at the very least. So, or at the very most. So that being said, generally, I don't do stuff like this, but as I said, this is only sort of a Let's Explain and more of to go with the challenges. The first challenge is the Andes Challenge. Bolivia, though pretty obscure today, was a big shot power back in the 1800s. Those of you who play things like the New Nations mod might in fact know that Bolivia starts out the game as the hegemon in the Peru-Bolivia Confederation, with Peru and South Peru as vassals until Peru breaks out almost inevitably. Though even then, one must definitely notice the size of Bolivia, especially compared to nearby places like Paraguay and Peru, which it dwarfs pretty easily. So the folks at home might be wondering exactly what happened to Bolivia in world history to make it the small, backwards, and one of the weakest states in South America that it is. In fact, back in the 40s, Bolivia actually fought Paraguay, and actually had the first tanks used in all of Latin America. Problem is, they lost pretty badly. So, with such a shrinking country, I mean, how could it fall so far? What could possibly... Oh, wait, they don't have any? Oh. Bolivia starts out with almost all of its cores on neighbors. If you have Victoria 2 regular, it's actually a little bit worse, as Chile not only gets Atacama, but they also get Potosi here, which is basically your most valuable region, and in fact one of the most valuable ones, as it has the only, well, one of the only supplies of iron in the entirety of Latin America. Brazil has a core on what's modern Acre, but is at the time Taraqua, as part of the Amazonas. And Paraguay and Argentina contest Alto Paraguay, though I do strongly suggest you check out a mod that has Chaco as its own region at the very least. And in addition to that, Brazil will often try to go after regions of yours if it gets in a war, and of course Peru is no stranger to attacking La Paz or Potosi, and sometimes. And with only 3 starting units and 2 more able to be produced with 3 mobile troops, though your army is pretty formidable, it is far from being the best in Latin America, and in fact, really, to almost any of the countries that start out with cores on it, save Paraguay and in certain conditions Chile, they can all really pretty easily take you out. They do get the bonus that they start out allied with Peru, but they will almost never actually positively respond to any calls you might give. So, what's the challenge, you might be asking yourself? Are you ready for it? Because this is going to be a hell of a challenge. Win every single war as Bolivia. Go through the entire game and never surrender any of your provinces to any enemy. Do not surrender Atacama to Chile. Do not surrender Bolivia and Jujuy to Argentina. Do not surrender Taragua to the Brazilians. And do not sacrifice Alto Paraguay to Argentina or Paraguay. In fact, there are even some conquests. Some conquests you're able to make, as there's a province in Argentina, 2 provinces actually, in Finchana, as well as the actual Jujuy province itself, that though they get 1 province each, and it would be pretty ahistorical to actually eat up all these places, an additional part of the challenge is that you have to conquer these back. And to salt it all off, if you want to go for the advanced run, Paraguay starts off with a single region that I can test with Brazil. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to take this single province away from Paraguay before Brazil does the same, and then hold it to the end of the game. For bonus points, you can also try to conquer Paraguay, but then nobody else will really contest you for that place, or no one will really contest you for Bajo Paraguay, because it's doesn't have any other course on it. So with that being said, let's talk about how to actually not lose. First things first, here's going to be a common trend with all of these. Soldiers in the capital province. Not very surprised, are you? This is basically 3/4 of my videos. Soldiers are just in so much demand in so many countries in Victoria too, it's not even funny. One thing Bolivia has that does make it in fact the easiest challenge of the 3 is a pretty much balanced budget. It also has a pretty good, see if we can get it, pretty good layout of actual, populations. And in fact, uniquely to this, excuse me, uniquely to this, challenges like this, almost all of your population is centered around La Paz, and La Paz, Potosi, and your capital region from the start of the game. Actually, I take what I said back. You're not going to encourage soldiers here, you're going to encourage them in your populated sector instead, duh. Anyway. And for those of you not keeping it score at home, these are some of the few provinces that Bolivia starts out with that no other country has a core on. So they'll actually need to bite the bullet and take some infamy to try and get them off you, which means that generally they won't be in the danger of that actually happening. And on top of that, they're generally going to be more of your actual proper South Indian or Quechua or Aymara, I've never really known how to pronounce that, populations. So that means that you won't have to worry about converting them either, since they're not, like the South Indians, well, less that because Chile is South Indian too, but the Platinians in places like Formosa, really most of these actually are, and Guarani, which are also accepted cultures in, well, not Paraguay, but Argentina. Okay, that aren't accepted by anyone. Gotta double talk me here, but I believe there are eventually awesome events to make them accepted for both of these places and mods. You'll have to worry about converting these guys to South Indian because they're in provinces without primarily your accepted cultures. Also, Goshinoka, mostly Platinian. But since only you have cores on these places, even if an influx of non-U populations does come in, it's easier to convert them without another core in the province. So, with that also said, I would suggest starting technology from, unsurprisingly, either the army or commerce tree. Once again, like most nations of Victoria 2, freedom of trade is very much a big help, but if you can really, really help it, and I really don't recommend this military stat system could also considerably help out, especially. Yes, seriously, excuse me. Especially considering the hard to get by terrain in most of these areas here. So, as long as you can keep that up, keep your soldiers in La Paz, it's very much possible to actually complete this challenge. It is the easiest of the three, but it is still no laughing matter. As said, I would not recommend a beginning person to try something like this because it will probably end in frustration and losing. So, with that being said, let's move on to your next of the three challenges. Well, this is a funny place for a challenge. I only see one little province here. In fact, very little. Literally little. Most of these other one provinces are considerably bigger than this place, even neighboring Bhutan. This is Sikkim, the smallest nation represented in-game, not by population, but by size and RGO and soldier totals. There are more people, but they're mostly out of the actual RGO. Sikkim is a one-province minor, and one of the 4 in proper India, and one of the several on the Indian subcontinent that aren't that don't start directly in the sphere of influence of the UK. Your challenge, if you choose to accept it, and I would really think this through if I were you, is to form India from here. Big step up, isn't it? Gotta do so much more conquering. You gotta get, in fact, specifically, all these provinces, including that one that you'll have to conquer the entirety of Tibet to actually get. Not very uplifting news, is it? You do have a few advantages, but really, in general, the biggest thing I have to say here is that if you want to try this challenge, this challenge specifically, I'd recommend it more in stock Victoria 2. AHD does have its certain advantages, mostly centered around your actual one little province here. But generally, the ability to actually research and make proper infantry and do all those things like that will really help Sikkim out a lot more than going through regular civilization. So speaking of which, that's one of the most important facets. If you are an AHD, these are going to be your best friend, all these military reforms. In particular, foreign weapons, military construction, and army training. No, wait, not army training. Which one of these? Foreign training methods. Those are going to help you out in so many ways. Particularly, they'll more easily allow you to actually stomp your neighbors, which are also out of the sphere of the UK. In addition to this, by the way, here's the conditions for forming India, if you really want to see that. The biggest thing, though, is the advancement in the military constructions tab. This will cause a fort to spawn in your capital. Usually this isn't too useful. I mean, your capital is generally pretty far away from any of your closest enemies, and the only real reason you want to have a fort there is to try and protect it from occupation. But even then, your enemies could logically easily just start occupying and be harder to knock out because, you know, fort. But the downsides of having a fort in your capital aren't so pronounced when your nation is your capital. And though this won't help out so much when, say, Bhutan tries to, or say Nepal tries to invade you, well, yeah, actually, when Bhutan tries to invade you, because they're not actually large enough to think that they pose a threat to you, Nepal, the likes of Nepal and even the UK, really, if you can actually bait them into it, are going to try and directly attack you. Go to the fort, and if it's well enough and you've got all your other technologies and your army is big enough, that will actually lead to some pretty devastating losses from them. In fact, pulling a stunt like this is actually one of the better ways to try and form India, as it'll severely hurt the British and minor Indian power armies in the area if you can successfully pull it off. Only problem being, if you don't successfully pull it off, you're probably going to get conquered. No points for guessing the national focus. as your soldiers start with, as with Texas, or not with as with Texas, though that is true. As with our third challenge, barely enough people to actually support that population and tend to quit very easily. This will also give you the added benefit, and this is something a little bit gamey here. If you really don't think you need the defense, if you really don't think you need the soldiers that bad, you just want to maintain the status quo, you can sharply help your economy out by lowering defense spending, yet keeping a national focus for soldiers in your capital. So that way you'll still have the influx, but it'll match out with the outpour, as long as you can make sure that most of the most of the influx isn't to a bunch of small little unorganized soldier populations where all the ones that are quitting are from your actual armies. That could be a problem, but there is a pretty easy way to actually solve for the amount of armies you have, and that's to turn your eyes directly westward. Nepal here is in the same region as your capital. In fact, it and your capital are the region. Oh, along with Bhutan here. So, if you can conquer Bhutan, if you can conquer Bhutan and Nepal, then you just have one big old Jumla region in which a bunch of soldiers will be pouring out, and it's almost entirely made of mountains. Nepal is entirely your culture, and you're entirely their culture. Bhutan has at least a modest amount of your culture, and I believe... Oh, no, they're only Tibetan, so you'll still have the malice for recruiting people there. But still, it's just overall a wonderful region to have to actually attack India from, considering how awful it is to actually assault. Keep in mind that in all likelihood, as you expand, Britain probably will try to put you in their sphere. This is bad, unless you're in a house divided. This is one of the few opportunities. In fact, if you're going to play a house divided for this challenge, for one reason, this is going to be it. You could actually attack Britain to get out of your sphere of influence hood in AHD if your relations are really low enough, or if things go really... or if you don't want to do that, AHD also has the basic ability to throw out any sphere overlords you have and declare yourself as a new free nation, free of British influence, where you can also seize any factories they've invested you, and it's all really great. As far as getting off ground zero is concerned, even though most of Punjab isn't actually part of the core for India, and in fact, the provinces you're able to conquer fall under that purview. The only ones you're able to are Kashmir and Punjabi Kalat, which are the only two regions in Punjab not to be Indian. That's still a place you can actually feasibly go after. So if you're actually able to beat Britain at any point, in which case, congratulations, seriously, that's not easy. Or if you can at least make sure that Tibet gets free and you get military access. Punjab is a good target to go after, and though it is a huge gamble actually getting such a large province, Delhi is connected right to it, and it's one of the larger provinces of India. So even though it'll take more war score, if you can get that, you can take out the entirety of the Pakistani states. And if you can do that, well, for one thing, that's going to start making you look like a big enough power that pan-Indian rebels that pop up in Britain's one province minor states are going to go for you. And that's going to be a very good thing if you can actually physically be India to actually do this challenge. Though, I won't consider you a winner if you just, like, get Rajaputania here, these dumb little one-miners in Rajaputania and, like, Nepal and Bhutan, and consider yourself victory just because a pan-nationalist and Gwylor threw out the king and tried to put you in place as rightful ruler of India. Yeah, if you have, like, 5 provinces, I'm not going to count that as a real win. But, it does help considerably if you actually physically have all these places cored, and you have the unify on all these places, and in fact, they can actually get you infamy-free conquests on Kalat, Makran, Sindh, Kutch, and Punjab, as long as they're down to their last region. So overall, that is a great bonus. Oh, and one more thing. Do yourself a favor. Change away from the royal faction to the nationalist faction as soon as it starts. Usually, the nationalists are reactionaries, and any nation are actually going to be more of an economic nihilist. However, the royal faction has state capitalism. The national faction has interventionism. You can't actually see the effects immediately, you'll have to go a day into it. But, state capitalism has a 25% tax increase, while protectionism gets like 50% tax efficiency increase, and removes the minimum tax rating. Also, does not impede your ability to put on tariffs at all, and since tariff efficiency is also tied to tax efficiency, that'll help you out a bit too. So that being said, the real enemy is going to be Britain, but your secondary enemy is going to be the economy. As long as you can get your economy running, Britain is going to be a huge hassle. It's going to be hard to take out without really driving them into suiciding into a really well-defended province in your home of Jumla. But if you can, well, you just kick down the door and the whole rotten structure is going to collapse on them. British India is one of the most turbulent places on Earth, and as long as you can make the Brits entirely disinterested in it, victory is not that far from yours. So, though that is not going to, I'm not going to say that's going to be easy. It is the medium of these three challenges today, and it's still Britain. By God, they're still really strong, and do keep in mind that at one point, unless a revolt and become free, which you're going to need to take out Hyderabad in the case of France, and, well, you're going to have to inevitably fight Portugal whether you want to or not. You're going to have to take out France and Portugal. I bet you could have guessed that from how I just said it. But those are those guys are no laughing matter. They're almost never going to actually have an army physically in India. But if they do, they're going to be as much of a fight. Well, Portugal less so, but they're still going to be as much of a fight as Britain would be. So remember, work on those military technologies and keep your economy afloat. As long as you can do that, it's going to be really hard, but it's not impossible. Damn near such, especially if you actually are going with the 1936 constraint like you should be. But not impossible. So if there's any hotshot out there who thinks he can form India from Sikkim and does it successfully, well, good on you. You probably are a hotshot because that's really hard to do. But now you might be thinking to yourself, these are 3 challenges in increasing difficulty, and he mentioned last segment that there was one place that would actually be harder. Now, what could possibly be harder than defending pretty much an entire nation against being surrounded by enemies, or throwing the Brits out of one of their most prized colonial possessions? Well, there's only one thing that's harder. Surviving as Tripoli. I believe it was the Sheikhdom of Tripoli. Well, to put it simply, first off, and something I kind of forgot to mention last time around, their population is considerably more than Sikkim could ever hope to be. In fact, if you capture your actual namesake of the region here, you actually have enough population that you could reasonably, well, somewhat reasonably, challenge Bolivia, but not so much, considering they still have plenty of people. But you would still be the second most, and far closer than Sikkim could ever come, is what I'm trying to get across here. In addition, your RGO is much better than producing wool, which is the least valuable crop in the game, which is what Sikkim produced. And in general, you have more people actually in your RGO, producing the much more expensive fruit. Now, sounds a lot easier, right? Well, there are a few problems. First off, one of your armies doesn't actually start out with enough people to successfully support the brigade. The two people that support it, if you see when clicking the no points for guessing soldiers national focus, is that they actually quit on day one, even before you hit the unpause button. That's pretty much dedication to getting out of the rebellion, I think. But speaking of which, that's a little bit weird. Some of you more keen-eyed viewers might notice a red flag in the diplomacy tab. Or, you know, just having foreknowledge of this scenario in Victoria 2. In fact, if you go to the actual wall this is supposed to represent, you might notice something. There is the Ottoman Empire versus Tripoli, 62-2. And their wall goal? Shouldn't be anything too bad, right? I mean, they are not trying to annex Tripoli. That isn't very hopeful, is it? They have 46 armies. So, if there's any hotshot out there who thinks he can form India from Sikkim and does it successfully, well, good on you. You probably are a hotshot because that's really hard to do. But now you might be thinking to yourself, these are 3 challenges in increasing difficulty, and he mentioned last segment that there was one place that would actually be harder. Now, what could possibly be harder than defending pretty much an entire nation against being surrounded by enemies, or throwing the Brits out of one of their most prized colonial possessions? Well, there's only one thing that's harder. Surviving as Tripoli. I believe it was the Sheikdom of Tripoli. Well, to put it simply, first off, and something I kind of forgot to mention last time around, their population is considerably more than Sikkim could ever hope to be. In fact, if you capture your actual namesake of the region here, you actually have enough population that you could reasonably, well, somewhat reasonably, challenge Bolivia, but not so much, considering they still have plenty of people. But you would still be the second most, and far closer than Sikkim could ever come, is what I'm trying to get across here. In addition, your RGO is much better than producing wool, which is the least valuable crop in the game, which is what Sikkim produced. And in general, you have more people actually in your RGO, producing the much more expensive fruit. Now, sounds a lot easier, right? Well, there are a few problems. First off, one of your armies doesn't actually start out with enough people to successfully support the brigade. The two people that support it, if you see when clicking the no points for guessing soldiers national focus, is that they actually quit on day one, even before you hit the unpause button. That's pretty much dedication to getting out of the rebellion, I think. But speaking of which, that's a little bit weird. Some of you more keen-eyed viewers might notice a red flag in the diplomacy tab. Or, you know, just having foreknowledge of this scenario in Victoria 2. In fact, if you go to the actual wall this is supposed to represent, you might notice something. There is the Ottoman Empire versus Tripoli, 62-2. And their wall goal? Shouldn't be anything too bad, right? I mean, they are not trying to annex Tripoli. That isn't very hopeful, is it? They have 46 armies. So, you might be thinking to yourself, what could possibly be harder than taking out the Brits from a one-province minor? And then you look at this map and you see Tripoli in its large size and think, well, geez, Kaiser Anony, that looks a lot bigger and a lot easier to actually do something major with. Why even bother comparing it? I mean, it obviously should be easier, right? And while it is true that the RGO of Tripoli is considerably better than Sikkim's, having only 2 wool provinces as opposed to Sikkim's 1 of 1, which is, by the way, the least valuable crop of an RGO in the game, and while their population is considerably more than Sikkim's barely 10k 1 province, they have a problem. more eagle-eyed viewers, or just those a little bit more accustomed to what actually happens in Victoria 2, might have noticed something from the get-go in the diplomacy bar up here. A little red flag here, huh? At war with the Ottoman Empire. Well, I mean, surely with such a completely one-sided fight, 62-2 like that, their war goal wouldn't be anything too serious. Annex Tripoli, huh? Oh. Needed war score is about 85. They don't even have to fully conquer you. That's not very good, is it? And on top of that, to hurt matters even more, you don't even start one of your soldiers. In fact, you'll notice I have already turned on and encouraged soldiers to show this. 2 of your soldiers desert the population of this army at the start of the game, even before clicking on pause, and actually make it unable to resupply again. So you're basically at war with one of the largest armies in Europe, with 2 real armies and 1 reserve battalion, made up of irregulars, while they have a cavalry right next door to you. Not very uplifting, eh, Vox? Of course, as per usual, the very first thing you can do is encourage soldiers, but I wouldn't recommend, actually, trying to fix your economy at all in the First Ottoman War. By God! It doesn't matter if you go bankrupt. It really doesn't. As long as you're able to make national stockpile payments and military spending, you have a chance of survival. But if you try to balance your budget from the start of the game, you will invariably get destroyed. Only think about that after the Ottomans have turned their attention away from you, which is what it's going to be. Don't even try to kid yourself, by the way, people who are thinking about this challenge. You're not going to defeat the Ottoman armies directly. Hell, even the only real way you can get rid of them, in fact, and this is a good segue into the actual strategy here, they have an army in, I can't remember if it's Tobruk or Benghazi off the top of my head, and a cavalry army here in Misrata. If you can coax them and just start trying to occupying provinces while keeping your soldiers mostly as far away from the front lines as you can, they're going to take they're going to take really bad damage from attrition, considering that every single province you own has a supply limit of 2 to them. And that's basically your trump card. No, they can't really attack you without suffering casualties. The Tripolitanian AI will try to rectify this by trying to attack all at once, which is exactly the opposite of what rectifying means. And a smart Ottoman player, or if in some cases a very lucky AI, or just good AI, will track your armies down and destroy them, which means that these tactics probably aren't going to work on an actual player. So, all I can say is just keep your armies back, wait for them to die of attrition, and then hope for the best. If you can actually defeat them in your first war, though, well, make their attention turn away in the first war, though, you'll have some advantages. You're not going to take any provinces from the very first war. No, that is not going to happen. You're going to at least need the truce time to actually build up an army that is actually capable of doing any real damage to them, much less actually defeating them. There, I didn't voice crack that time. Like the likes of Serbia and Greece, you are almost guaranteed to need a war between them and Egypt or them and Russia before you're actually able to make any real offense. And even if you do take territory, well, you got a little bit more of a problem. Though capturing Tripoli as a very major, very award-winning province to your actual home region, and with almost 100k of your own population, which is something you really can't find basically anywhere, also gives you a port. You know who can invade you if you have a port open? The 2 Sicilies, the Papal States, Tuscany, Sardinia, Piedmont, France, Spain, Portugal, the UK, Greece. You can get invaded by Greece. Anyone can invade you at that point. And considering you're barely able to defeat one of the weaker great powers, you are not going to be able to stand up to a real, great power invasion, especially considering that that great territory you start out with has a supply limit of 7, as opposed to 2, which means that any invading power should be pretty easily able to conquer it. And add to that, and to give you a situation that you're pretty much going to have to restart from, if France starts out taking Tunisia instead of trying to gain areas from Algeria, the AI is actually coded to immediately attack you if you won the war against the Ottomans. Well, not immediately, but they will immediately try to attack you and start planning a war out. And so you can be at war with France and their gigantic colonial armies, which are even better and in more numbers and with more navies and etc. than the Ottomans. Which, if you get into war with France and they're about to annex you, you might as well restart. That's not going to be a war you can realistically win. So with that basically said, I'm going to give you the actual conditions of the challenge now that you know how to well, you know on what conditions to actually restart, because you are going to be doing a lot of that. And, oh, by the way, military tax, obviously. Anyway, reforms. I'm going to actually tell you the conditions of the challenge. Those who are more experienced with Victoria 2 might want to sit down right now, because, you'll need a moment to think about your life. Conquer Tunisia, Algeria, throwing the French out, Morocco, throwing the Spanish out, the whole of Libya, and North African Egypt, which means all of Egypt, including the Damyat region here, all of Sudan. You can free Asmara and the Levant if you want, or just take it for yourself. And if you're playing the New Nations mod, or Pop the Man mod, or any other mod that happens to be in, form the Maghrebi nation. Ah, fuck you, Windows. Whoa! Victoria 2 crashing caused jarring jump cut. Anyway, yeah. Form the Maghrebi nation by conquering all of North Africa. If you want some advice on that, I can tell you one thing. Good luck! You're gonna need it. By God, I don't think anyone's ever actually successfully done that as Triple E, and if you out there manage to do that, you will be the first. The only real advice I can offer here is don't be too apprehensive about experimenting and trying new things, considering your games are not gonna last that long initially anyway. And do keep in mind that it's going to be mostly down to luck, and a lot less about how actually skilled you are playing the game, though that is a ungodly large factor too. So that being said, what do you actually do if you complete one of these mind-blowingly hard challenges of great prestige? Yeah, prestige. Well, if you actually do complete one of them, try to take some occasional screenshots or videos, and eventually, once you're done, compile them, make a little story based off of them. I would recommend taking good notes, and post it as an AAR in the Paradox forum. If you're really unsure on how to space that out properly, just go out there and check out how the actual writers do that. They've got some very good ones on there. And to those from the forums watching, I'm not trying to spam your forums with AARs. I'm trying to promote people doing something hard and difficult. But if you're going to do that, for the love of God, make sure you don't die 3 seconds into the game. There are enough AARs where the guy stops it like 3 minutes in because he actually fails at the game. My biggest tip for you for actually writing those and posting those on there is actually going at least 60, 70 years in before you actually decide to stop posting your first few episodes. Just try to keep things well notated for reference. Because if you start in 1836 and your first episode is to 1839 and then you lose in 1840, well, they're not going to think too well of you. And in extension, they're not going to think too well of me. So, all I can say is, if you actually do win these, you're going to win so many brownie points. Everybody will respect you. I will too. And, yeah, you'll be overall, all around, a pretty cool guy. And if you don't want to do that, just upload a series of videos and send them to me, and I'll try and still give you at least a little prestige, but I don't think it'll be as much, considering it'll just be me. Anyway, so with that being said, good luck and Godspeed here actually trying these, and tune in next week for the very, very, very overly long USA special next week. So with that being said, wait a minute. Oh my god! Oh shit, I forgot about the Eastern Front. Oh god, I gotta get back there. Commandant's gonna be so mad. Oh god, oh man. See you Thursday, folks. It's time to finish things off. I've been abandoning duty way too long. Thursday is going to be the Red Orchestra 2 finale. And then Saturday is going to be an LMP. A little bit disappointing on there, I guess, but with that being said, see you then, folks.